My path to the International Space Station was a long one. I'll just go through it very briefly. I was 9 years old. I watched the first two people walk on the moon. I thought, I'm going to grow up to be something. Why don't I grow up to be that? You know, that looks like an interesting thing. That was an easy thing to say, but then how did I get from being a 9-year-old Canadian kid where we had no astronaut program to eventually being allowed to fly 3 times in space and command a space station? So, I, like a lot of kids, I just looked to role models or looked what the other people were doing. And at the time, the Soviets and the Americans, most of them were engineer, fighter pilot, test pilots. And for a 9 or 10-year-old kid, I'm thinking, that all sounds pretty good. I was working on a farm. So it helped me decide what courses to take in high school so that then I could go to university. I joined Air Cadets because they taught me to fly. In fact, in London, Ontario is where I learned to fly. And in university, I studied mechanical engineering because I grew up on a farm and I didn't really like things that were smaller than my fist, so mechanical engineering seemed perfect to me. And then I joined through the military and became a pilot and then a fighter pilot, and I flew CF-18s. But I always wanted to go to test pilot school. And so I worked through and got selected and went to test pilot school. And then I realized to be an astronaut I was going to need more technical education, so I did a master's degree. And I did some postgraduate work at another university, so 3 different universities of education. And that got me through to the point where I could get selected. So if you're a 9-year-old kid or a 30-year-old kid thinking about what you need, number 1 is just the straight technical education. Number 2 is the operational experience where you can show that you can make decisions like being a fighter pilot or a doctor. And then the 3rd is just to have a healthy body, and part of that is being born, and part of it is what you eat and what you do for exercise. But that's the recipe that got me through all of the wickets that eventually allowed me to get selected as an astronaut and then do spacewalks and command a spaceship. The purpose of a team is to accomplish some sort of objective. Otherwise, why form a team, right? And so every single group of people that are going to constitute a team needs to understand what the objective is, and then almost always is going to have some sort of organization within themselves. If it's 2 people that have to do something that takes 5 minutes, you probably don't even need a leader. They can divvy it up, decide what's going to happen, and just do the task together without much planning. But if it's a team of 6 people running a space station for half a year, the complexity becomes enormous, and therefore there's a huge distribution of work and potential problems, claustrophobia being one of them. So if you're going to have a complex team, a team that has a multifaceted set of tasks to accomplish, what is the right way to choose the team, to set up the team, and then to make that team be effective? So the first part of that is choosing a team. And the number 1 thing you want, of course, is competence. Within that small group of people needs to be all the skills necessary in order to accomplish what's going on. But then the second part is to build a team of people that will be able to work together. And even with 6 people, you could decide to have no leadership. But 6 people becomes almost unmanageable, and it's hard to keep track of everybody's daily objectives. So for something like a space station crew, we definitely set 1 person as commander to be able to shepherd what's happening and to make sure that the objectives are being met on a minute-by-minute and month-by-month basis. I was the commander of the International Space Station. International crew, different languages, very different cultures, religions, expectations, subtle things that you wouldn't even think, but that become very important. And so the next facet is preparation. Recognizing that I needed to prepare this group of people so that at some time in the future, they would be able to face something that we couldn't even anticipate yet. And the way to do that is to share common experience, to look at everybody's strengths, everyone get to know each other, myself as their commander to get to know each of them as best I can, and then know people's strengths, know people's weaknesses, and figure out how to make this group of people work together. And targeting that objective in the future, or that list of objectives. And it's almost like planting a crop and then tending it as it grows and then watching it flower. And if you do that right, your part of it is pretty minimal. So long as you've planted it properly, you've got the right soil, you put the right amount of water in, and then you do the necessary little bit of weeding as you go, you can get some pretty spectacular flowers at the end that you didn't really have anything to do with. And leadership can be like that. The real fundamental difference of space station, though, is at any given moment, your little crop of flowers can get hit by a tornado. And in that case, you as the leader no longer can be gentle and listening and tending. You have to suddenly become a dictator and make all the hard decisions immediately, and everyone has to know that that's going to happen so that then you can save everybody's lives and hopefully save the space station itself. So I really see that task of leadership, of team building, is looking at the people, getting to know all of their strengths and weaknesses, doing all of the investment of time in advance, and having a clear understanding of the delegation of regular responsibilities, but also the ultimate delegation when time is very short and the stakes are very, very high. And hopefully, if you build it that way and you tend it as it goes, when you get to the end, despite the changes in weather, you end up with a beautiful crop of flowers that everybody can appreciate. Competence and individual character and commitment. That's a nice mnemonic, really, to remember some of the things that you want to remind yourself of when you're tasked to lead a group of people. And commitment is the one that I think sits most heavily on your shoulders as the leader. Competence is the group, and you need to ensure everyone's there. And character, that's something you can work on, of course, but it's a lot innate of what you're born with, and you need to understand the character of the people around you. But commitment is really what's going to make the difference, and the one that really is up to you. Commitment doesn't mean telling everybody what to do. Commitment doesn't mean always knowing what every single person is doing and having a part of it, right? Commitment, to me, is understanding where we're trying to get to. Really clearly understanding it, knowing where we're trying to get to, and then having spent the time to make sure that everybody in the team understands equally as well as I do where we are all trying to get to. So that when you have your 1,000 little decisions you make every single day, everybody can be thinking, okay, this decision is kind of peripheral, but I know where we're all trying to get to, and therefore I can help nudge things along. And that's one part of the commitment as the leader, is to make sure that people really clearly understand the destination that's in mind. The other is, if you wait until leadership is required, the visible part of the leadership being required, then it's way too late. You know, if any sports coach will tell you that. It's not game day that matters. If you haven't done everything prior to game day, any golf player, if you wait until you're lining up to hit the ball to do your work, it's obviously too late. It's the years that went into getting ready for it that really matter. And for the leader, even though maybe it's not nearly as clear as a ball game or striking a golf ball, the preparation is just as key. And you have to commit to that right away. From the first time you hear that maybe you might be the leader of this group of people, it's time to commit yourself to it and start thinking about it, start planning, looking for ways to start building this big foundation of capability that you all need together, so that when you occasionally get to the peak of hitting the ball or having a game, that everyone's ready to play. And then the last part of it is you need to constantly readdress it. On a minute-by-minute, hour, day-to-day basis, you need to look at how your team is working, how you are interacting with your team, who is withdrawn or busy doing what they're doing, or maybe has forgotten where we're all trying to get to. Celebrate all of the little successes so the team recognizes that we're moving forwards. Be ready to change people if they're headed in the wrong direction. Give them the nudge and the reminder of where we're all headed at the same time. And then also be committed to the final, the last step in a process is often, you give it some sort of category name, like cleanup or a pack up or tear down or something. But often that can be just as critical to the overall success as your team as any of the steps along the way. And so make sure that you keep that commitment as the leader and continue to lead the group right through until the end of the game, or until your Soyuz has hit the ground, or you finished every single medical debrief or whatever is involved in your particular set of leadership. But it is definitely a level of responsibility that you need to shoulder yourself and that you need to commit to in order to be successful. Every time I get on an elevator, I think about what we're going to do if the elevator has a mechanical problem. I look around at the people that I'm with and think, sometimes you know who you're with, but sometimes you have no idea. But you realize that you have all committed to something. You have all locked yourself in a very small mechanical device that may or may not work. And if it stops working, how are you going to react? Who's going to lead? But it's a random choice of people. And you may be in there with people who are claustrophobic or have no technical skills. And that type of randomness is what I really try and avoid when the outcome is my responsibility. I would really prefer not to be thrown into a very demanding situation, having had no time to prepare for it, to build a sense of joined and collective ability. In the space business, we would never do that. I know in a lot of popular science fiction, it's as if the astronauts just met each other in space. Of course, it's nothing like that. The selection process to become an astronaut is extremely rigorous, and even within the astronaut corps, we don't just throw crews together randomly. For my last space flight, basically I trained for 4 years prior to launch. And it's not just training on how to operate the equipment or how to run the experiments, but it's how to build a group of people. Something I learned a long time ago was a sense of operations. When we say operations in the space business, we mean where the outcome or the consequences of your actions have extreme result. Whether it's a spaceship killing the people or that extremely expensive experiment not being successful. Your actions where the consequences really matter. And we call that operational mindset. And how do you get a group of people to really internalize an operational mindset and be ready, therefore, to succeed? So we try it through a lot of analogs. The simplest is you sit around a table. And you can do this with any team as any leader. And let's say we're going to dock our Soyuz to the spaceship, or we are going to sell T-shirts at the Canadian National Exhibition. Okay, the simplest thing you can do is all sit around a table and go through the scenario from start to end. Okay, we are now the day before we're going to sell our T-shirts, or it's the day before we're going to dock with the space station. Let's go through it, big picture and then minute by minute, and let's simulate it, and let's think about things that can go wrong. And let's look for things that can go wrong and talk about how everybody's going to react. And let's get strong because we visualize disaster. Don't visualize success. Visualize disaster. And think about, okay, so our booth burns down, or it pours rain at the CNE, or our docking mechanism fails, or we ran completely out of smalls and mediums. Okay, how are we going to react? What's everybody actually going to do? And then do those as realistically as you can. Do a tabletop, but then if there's any technical or three-dimensional complexity to what you're doing, then actually get in some sort of simulator and practice it. During my second flight, we built Canadarm2 doing spacewalks for years. I trained for that flight for 4.5 years. One day in the underwater training pool where we built this huge mock-up of the arm, I was watching my partner do a task, and it occurred to me, because of the fidelity of our mock-up and the realism of our training and the anticipation of disaster, I started asking technical questions about the mechanism, what he was doing. It opened up a whole Pandora's box of things we hadn't thought about. We went and tested on the real arm. We found something we hadn't realized of the rolling friction, and actually had to change our technique. And this was just weeks before launch. And it would have broken our EVA. Our first EVA would have failed if we hadn't anticipated, built this level of capability, and then figured out a way to work around it. The other thing we do is we put ourselves in stressful situations. We fly 2-seat high-performance airplanes to go places. Because if you're used to navigating, dealing with emergencies, making decisions, and then sticking with them on a constant basis, you get better at it. Decision-making is a perishable skill, and it needs to be practiced, and especially operational decision-making. And we live at the bottom of the ocean. I commanded a team of people living at the bottom of the ocean. It's a wonderful analog of space flight. We go out in the forest with leadership schools in the military and have a whole bunch of tasks with a group of people. And what all of that does for you is number one, it focuses on the technical skills you need, but at the same time, it focuses on the psychological and group dynamic skills that you need. So, you get to the space station, it's 3 days before you undock, and your space station starts leaking ammonia into the universe. How are you going to deal with it? And because of the amount of work we'd put in advance, the years of preparation, of getting to know each other, we could all look around and go, well, this reminds me of the time we were driving submarines at the bottom of the ocean, or when we were in the pool and we did this, or whatever. This reminds me of. This is well within our preparation base, something we were ready for. And then you can deal with it. And afterwards, it's not a surprise that you prevailed because of the huge pyramid of preparation that went into getting you ready for the singular event. It diminishes fear, it builds team cohesion, and it really sets you up for success.